White supremacy. Weijia Jiang is there.
In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy.
President Trump denounced white supremacy today. 2 years ago, when a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia turned deadly, the president said this.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Today, Mr. Trump pledged more federal resources to combat domestic terrorism. He also recommended curbing the glorification of violence found in video games and restricting access to firearms for the mentally ill who pose a threat.
Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun.
But Mr. Trump did not talk about the need to mandate strong background checks on gun buyers, which he tweeted this morning and initially supported after the 2018 shooting at a Florida high school.
And I'm pissed, because my daughter I'm not going to see again.
Just days after meeting with victims and family members, the president had what he called a great meeting with the NRA and backed off his background check pledge. Today...
Hey, you all. Welcome back to the channel. And today we have to talk about these mass shootings. El Paso, Dayton. We have to speak about this and explore this in a way where we can kind of get to the root causes of some of these issues. What's been happening is there have been much attention given to the presidential candidates about how do we deal with this problem of white racism, white supremacy, white nationalism, the mass shootings, gun control, gun laws. How do we go about that? And so with so much that has been happening in this area, this is going to, I think, begin to shift and be one of the main issues going forward in this presidential campaign. And so as part of the Yang Gang, Yang supporters, it is quite clear that Andrew's going to be posed this question all throughout the course of the election. And I think that how Andrew Yang deals with this problem will really address the root causes of where that stems from, where it comes from. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. So, where does racism come from? How does it originate and why it originates? And that's it's a lot of information that goes into that. But what I was able to find was a very interesting article written by a person named Justin Pador, who examined this. Some of the cause of racism, mass shootings, and we also have to throw in some mental illness into that as well, because that is part of the problem. But we do have throughout the course of history situations like what we got in Nazi Germany, where an entire nation of people were basically in this situation where they were under these ideologies of supremacy, racial supremacy, and dominance of other people, and the destruction and killing and murdering of these people, consequently to what we get today with a lot of these ideologies. If it was just mental illness alone, then it would go to follow that a nation like Germany during that time, everybody would have been mentally ill in that country, which I don't think was the case or not. So it's definitely tied in with this ideology and this idea of racial supremacy. That is definitely a fact. But what is also something that has to be considered, is that, there is a little bit of mental illness in there, and gun control laws, and what's going to need to be done to do it, because it's a very broad area. And all of these are going to be on Andrew Yang's plate. But I'd like to read a portion of this article. I try to leave a link in the description. I think it's very important for us to really get to the root causes of some of these problems. So It's not in front of your screen, but I'm going to read some of it to you. When white workers are suffering, people of color offer convenient scapegoats for structural economic problems. Overpopulation is to blame instead of corporate destruction of resources. Immigration is to blame instead of deliberate technological unemployment. The presence of more desperate, disempowered people of color below white workers on the class ladder act as both consolation and a discipline. As I say, it could be worse, or that your job could be given to them if white workers saw their interests with other workers regardless of race instead of with other white regardless of class. It would be more difficult for elites to prevent economic reforms that ended poverty, unemployment, and environmental destruction. In the meantime, the economy wreaks havoc on all but a very few, and worse havoc on those without the insulations of caste privilege. Equality is incompatible with racism. Democracy, which is people having a say in their government to the degree they're affected by decisions, is incompatible with racism. White workers will never have the bargaining strength they need to have economic security if they choose to accept the divisions that ensue. This is obvious even by a quick glance at the US and Canada. Canada has universal health care and much more progressive taxation and a viable third party. These are all under attack and being dismantled, but they were won in the first place because of working people's fighting and struggling to win them. The U.S. has its own labor struggles where much was won, but labor in the U.S. has always been divided between fighting owners and managers on the one hand and bashing Black Americans and immigrants on the other. Workers in Canada, virtually the same as the U.S. in most ways, but lacking the history of slavery, could focus more on their economic interests, attacking immigrant communities on occasion. It shouldn't be forgotten, and win more. But all this discussion of racism's integral role in maintaining economic inequality and insecurity in the U.S. obscures the tragedy of a racist economy. An economy, and this is the important part, guys, that wastes human potential and condemns huge numbers to misery and poverty out of spite and cruelty. So, in short, basically what that's saying is racism is generally used as a scapegoat. This is a very much a symptom of economic problems. And the focus is placed on racism. It is placed on this kind of false idea and perception that if you're in a kind of elitist class, in this case, switching over from the economic problems because the leaders either can't fix the economic struggles or problems or they do not want to. In either case, they are using then race as the commodity, but it's a false commodity, and I'm going to show you why. They're using that as a commodity to then pacify the other race of people to keep them from uprisings, right? And the reason that it is a bad trade-off for those in that group, the white nationalists, the white supremacists, the reason this is a bad trade-off is because an economy that wastes human potential and condemns huge numbers to misery and poverty out of spite and cruelty is not a secure economy, right? It is not a prosperous economy because you're wasting talent, because you're not allowing the economy to find the people that it needs to go for. It is a bad trade-off for everyone in the end. And so this doesn't serve white people the white supremacists, the white nationalists, the white elitists, in the end, as much as they think it would. And so it's a complete misunderstanding of how economies work, right? Understanding the root problems, where racism comes from, and then seeing it as a symptom of these things makes things easier to identify how to solve the problem. Now, if you take someone like Andrew Yang, who is addressing this at the root cause, because he's going into what's going to get the boots off of the necks of the American citizens. You also have to consider that when it comes to numbers, when it comes to sheer numbers, who would you say is the most impoverished group of people in the United States, right? By number, not by ratio. By number, it would probably be something like about 30 million white people. And no matter how you care to look at that, 30 million white people, 30 million anything is a lot. And so there's quite a lot of this going around, right? And because of that, there's a lot of desperation. There's a lot of wanting to belong. There's a lot of looking for answers. And what you get is very impressionable, in some cases, young people that are more easy to be brought over into the mindset of white nationalism, white terrorism, and all of these things that are going to end with them with the short end of the stick. Don't let that be you. I know it's a lot of people who support Donald Trump who've joined the Yang gang because this is the people who've wised up to what's really going on. And I think they begin to understand what's happening here with this whole game. But I hope you all who have come over to the Yang gang, I hope, and maybe left some behind, I hope you all help some of your fellow Americans to understand that this is all part of the game that people like Donald Trump are playing on American citizens. Everything I just read in that article represented his entire tactic. And that is the tactic of scapegoating so that, just like the article says, they can either not fix the economic problems that exist or they don't have the power to do so. In either event, they got to keep you pacified. It's just like ancient Rome during the circus, during the gladiatorial games, that you'd have one day perhaps where you got free bread, free food, all the entertainment you could wish. And in a few weeks, you're going to be starving to death, right? White nationalists, people who fall for those type ideologies and go out here and kill a lot of people because they don't really understand what's going on or they're misled, should understand that don't be bamboozled into thinking some false idea, some token of you have white skin and thus you're in a better economic situation against elitist groups of people who won't suffer when you suffer from loss of jobs and you suffer from loss of value because they don't value you and they just use you as a means to an end. Don't be bamboozled by that. And for people who don't want to vote Democrat, they might recognize that people like Donald Trump are not the answer, but they just can't see themselves finding anybody else. Look towards somebody like Andrew Yang, who isn't really left or right, but forward, right? And he is dealing with the root causes of this. This is how you deal with the root cause of this. You take the boots off people's neck and you give them hope and you give them value so that they're not so impressionable to ridiculous ideas and manipulation, right? And so this is where we're at now in America. And as much as we're saying that we're in a good economy or it's a better economy, All of these are indications that that is not true. I believe that there is a direct correlation with the jobs that are being lost that Andrew Yang talks about and the rise of this white nationalism and white supremacy, right? Because we have history as an indication. We have a lot of research as an indication that when there is economic distress and problems in those political structures, that you got to find a scapegoat. You got to find somebody to blame because it will distract the people from the real problem, right? You're looking right at the real problem now. Being manipulated. Being manipulated. All of the information is here. We got Nazi Germany to look at it, to see what happens, how the Jews didn't cause Nazi Germany, the situation in Germany. But, the government had to find somebody to blame to keep the people off their backs, right? And we're in a similar situation with these elitist groups, these big corporations that are automating away jobs. And it's not so much that it's their fault. This is just the changing of the times, right? That this is where it's going. But there's still that underlying pressure from the cause of that. And it's always that someone's got to be responsible. It's got to be somebody responsible for this, right? So Andrew Yang, I think, definitely has the right answer for these young American people who are misled into these terrible ideologies, because nobody's born racist. And there are many situations where racists have turned their lives around when given the right information. So let's give them the right information so they aren't manipulated anymore, right? So that they don't think that just because they hold a certain skin color, that that's somehow going to protect them from economic distress. Many people who embrace ideas like white supremacy are ranked in that group of the poorest Americans in the world. Their skin color does not protect them from those economic distresses, and many are finding that out. It doesn't protect them from the decay of their country. It doesn't protect them from opioid addiction. It doesn't protect them from any of that, and black and brown people do not cause that. So it's time to wake up, and it's time for us to help these people wake up, because it's all our problems, right? I don't want to walk into a Walmart and have my family shot down, and I'm sure neither do you. And so this is how we stop it. You address the root cause of the problem, making it finally an act of terrorism, which should have been on the book ever since the World Trade Centers was bombed. Because a lot of these, which you have to understand, a lot of these militia groups, a lot of these so-called militia groups that talk about the right to bear arms and talk about, having, all this protection of the Constitution of freedom. You also have to keep in mind that there is a great connection between, not all of them, but there's great connection between some of them and white supremacy and white nationalism, right? And because of that, that puts us in even more dangers of these situations. Puts my family in danger, puts your family in danger. It's not just black and brown people that die. So this is something we need to deal with. We need to address it, but at the root cause. Making more laws won't stop it. You have to address the root cause of the problem, which is hopelessness and people trying to hold on to a false idea of value because the system has stripped away their real value, their economic value. It's taken their jobs away, right? And that's like a avalanche. It's like a dominoes start to fall, and many other issues and problems start to cascade along that. Economic stress, social stresses, mental illness, and it all goes on from there. This is how we stop it, and Andrew Yang has the answer. And when he's asked by the media and various people about how he plans to deal with this, I hope he, and I'm sure he will, go straight into the core of this, talk about really solving the problem, and not just dumping on a bunch of more laws, a bunch of more monitoring of freedoms, a bunch of more laws to monitor people on social media. And because all of these laws aren't going to necessarily stop people from doing that. You want to stop people, you got to give people back hope and make it so that when people are going around saying people are causing these problems and that problem, well, you can't see it because you have a country that cares enough about you to help you get to a more prosperous situation. So you're not as desperate. The problem is not as clear and present. And so you don't have to go to these extremes anymore. But I think this is where we're at with this, guys. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions about this. Heart goes out to the people of El Paso and Dayton. I can only imagine what these people are going through to just go on Walmart one day and come out, if you even come out at all, and your entire family's dead. And whether the president is responsible for this or not, I don't think matters at this point. I think what is clear is that they have latched on to a lot of the information that he's got out to go with their manifestos. Looking at many of his speeches, they look more like rallies to excite racial hostility than solutions. But you all can be the judge of that. Like I said, a lot of Trump supporters came and joined the Yang game. Maybe some of them can offer some insight onto that, or at the very least, I hope they can convince some of the Trump supporters that maybe they left behind to join, because this will address those feelings of hopelessness, the feelings of having to go out and be a part of something just to make you feel better than what you are, because things aren't working out for you, because the country doesn't have the proper system there for you to benefit from. And so you go looking for value other places and you find it in your skin color. But that's all I want to say in this video. If you all like content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe. Don't forget to join our website, bitcoinnyk.com. Use this blockchain technology to help to provide universal basic income to people all across the globe. We'd love for you to join and support the project. We'll leave a link in the description. And as always, guys, until next time, take care.